What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Monday, July 21st edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 10-game MLB slate tonight, $5 buy-in, $50K to first on DraftKings, $222 buy-in, $250K to first over there as well. Going to talk about my strategy, at least the way things look right now, for that large field $5 tournament. Obviously, you can apply it to other large field tournaments as well. Going to go game by game as always, talk about the best matchups, talk about how I'm getting to these games right now. Obviously, that is subject to change over the next few hours before the slate starts, but going to dive into everything. Feel free to ask questions. I will answer ones that I have answers for in chat. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. All that stuff helps out quite a bit. Also, I'm going to be using the Run the Sims projections that you see on the screen. These are available for you as well. Link is in the description below. 2 subscription options over there. You can get the full MLB projections package for $100 a month. Gets you access to everything that you see on the screen. Downloadable. You can upload them into whatever optimizer or sim product you use. Fully detailed projections coming out of our in-house play-by-play sims. If you have a betting process, you can use it for those as well. You have the results for pretty much every stat category you could want. If you don't need the full projections, you can also get the MLB Draft Caddy option, only $10 a month, overlays the DraftKings fantasy point projection directly onto your DraftKings lineup page, makes it easy to hand build, edit lineups throughout the night, whatever you need to do. That is also included in the full projections package as well, but you can get it as a standalone option. Link for that is in the description below. Choke Hold'em said, normally play low stakes, but won 3 tickets to the 222 tonight. How would you select 3 lineups for that? Would you just sort by ROI or maybe projection or hand build? So for me personally, I use SaberSim, and it has that entire function to handle that. But prior to that, what I would have done is tried to, like, assuming you're using a Sims tool, since you mentioned ROI, I would have sorted by ROI, but then also accounted for cash percentage, because if you're just using pure ROI out of a Sims tool, there's different ways that lineups get their ROI. And a lot of times the ones that are the highest, there's kind of going to be 2 things wrong with them. For one, the higher the simulated ROI is, the more likely your assumptions were wrong, just kind of by definition. So you have to deal with that. So I would, just naturally be double checking the highest ROI teams. And like, if the lineup that has the highest ROI is, I don't know, let's say the Angels, an Angel stack, and I look and the field that I simulated against had 1% Angels, then I'd be concerned, because if the Angels are 3%, maybe they're not that good of a stack. And obviously, you're not, it's easy to be like, it's easy to project a team for 1% when they're actually 3. And it's easier to like be off by 300% there than it is to like project a team to be 9% and they're actually 27. So you want to be aware of sensitivity there. And that's why I think using cash percentage can help to kind of balance that out. Is if you have a team that you have a couple teams that have simulated ROIs that are similar, but one's cashing at a lot higher rate. When I'm just trying to pick, 3 lineups to play in higher stake stuff, I would look towards that cash percentage as well. And then, also keeping in mind how you want to manage your risk. So I probably wouldn't just fire the same 3 stacks. I would probably balance that ROI with cash percentage, and then find 3 different stacks as well. But however you want to handle risk there is how I would probably do that. So starting here with the Yankees taking on the Blue Jays in Toronto. Kevin Gausman pitching for the Jays. Carlos Rodon going for the Yankees. $10,000 price tag on Rodon. $8,500 on Kevin Gausman. Really boom or bust spot here for Gausman. He is a good pitcher overall. He's reasonably priced at $8,500. Comes into this start with a 23% strikeout percentage, which is up a little bit from last year. Stuff plus grade this year is up 5 points. He's kind of rediscovered that splitter that he had lost last year. Not to the full extent of, a couple years ago when he was somebody that would flirt with a 30% strikeout percentage, but he is back to having at least better strikeout stuff. This Yankees lineup, or projected lineup at least, strikes out a lot, but also clearly has a lot of power. One of the best offenses in baseball overall against right-handed pitching. so far this season. Coming into today, they, I believe, have the highest WRC plus in baseball. I'm double checking that right now. But if it's not number one, they are very close. Obviously, that can fluctuate a bit. Right now, they're tied with the Diamondbacks for the most production against right-handed pitching this season. So it obviously is a very scary spot for Kevin Gausman. But this isn't a great pitching slate. There are good pitchers, but there's kind of a combination of, guys that have some sort of red flag, whether it's the matchup, whether they're good but not great. So I do think Gausman is interesting here at 8,500. He's projected for about 21% ownership. I'm getting to 42% right now. That is scary. I will not be upset if that comes down a little bit. It is a lot of risk on a pitcher facing the best offense in baseball. But again, you do have those strikeouts here as well. When you look through this Yankees lineup, Cody Bellinger is difficult to strike out. But, aside from that, Dominguez strikes out a lot. Judge strikes out a lot. Stanton obviously strikes out a lot. Jazz strikes out a lot. Goldschmidt's a tough strikeout. And then you get to the bottom of the order where there's K's there as well. And obviously not as good quality of hitters. So it is really a boom or bust spot here for Gausman. He absolutely can get blown up, but also, if he's on top of his game, can certainly rack up some Ks against this team. From a split standpoint for Gausman so far this season, striking out 25.4% of the right-handed hitters that he has faced, 20.8% of lefties. That is noteworthy on Gausman because for a lot of his career, he has been reverse splits both in terms of production allowed and in terms of strikeout percentage. This year, though, actually striking out righties at a higher rate than lefties, allowing similar power to both sides of the plate, about a 180 expected ISO to both sides. So very scary spot, but there is upside for him. He is reasonably priced. Happy to get to him here at 8,500 and take my chances. Again, if that number comes down from 42%, I won't be upset because that is a terrifying amount of any pitcher to have against the Yankees. But I do think the upside there on Gausman looks pretty good. I haven't looked yet to see if I'm getting to Yankees bats, but certainly wouldn't be upset either if in a second I find out that I'm just playing Gausman and I'm playing a lot of the Yankees. It is a spot that strikes me as a lot of just tournament appeal on both sides here, given the home run upside for the Yankees and the strikeout upside for Gausman. For Carlos Rodon, I think he's more difficult to get to. I'm not getting to him. He's getting 4% ownership. He's expensive at 10K and just has a really, really tough strikeout matchup here against Toronto. This is one of the most difficult teams in baseball to strike out. Their active roster since the start of last season against left-handed pitching ranks 25th in strikeout percentage at 20%. So that's a little bit higher than you get against right-handed pitching, but it is still low. And one thing you have to keep in mind, too, when you're just looking at the active roster K percentage against left-handed pitching in particular, it can at times, depending on the team, you're going to have bigger effects for some teams than others, but it can get pushed up a little bit because it's including guys that won't be in the lineup against lefties, platoon hitters that generally just have elevated strikeout percentages that aren't actually relevant. But either way, it's just not a good strikeout matchup here for Rodon. It's an expensive price tag. There's other pitchers that are cheaper that project a bit better. So even though he is a good pitcher overall, I'm not really interested in getting to him here. He does have one of the highest strikeout percentages on the slate at 28% this year. So I guess you could make the case of just, nobody's going to play the guy with, or one of the guys with the highest strikeout percentage on the slate. But I'm probably not going to really play him much either. Looking at the bats here, starting on the Yankee side, I am getting to them a little bit. I am a little bit above the field, it looks like, on most of these guys. Nothing too crazy, though. As far as ownership goes, we're getting around 6% ownership coming into Judge and Stanton, and then it goes down from there. For me, I have about 12% Judge, so I'm about 2x the field there. I have about 9% of Jazz, $5,500 second base and third base eligibility. So the MPE on him makes it a little bit easier to get him into lineups. I'm at 9% on Stanton, 6% apiece on Dominguez and Goldschmidt, and then go down from there. So I am over the field on the Yankees against Gausman, but not by a wide margin, not something that's going to significantly impact my night. But I do think they are, and there's going to be plenty of these because it's a 10-game slate where you have Coors Field drawing a lot of ownership. The Yankees are certainly one of these teams that you can kind of take advantage of it being a 10-game slate where usually it's tough to get to the Yankees at low ownership because everybody knows that they're one of the best offenses in baseball. So you can get really low owned upside here, whether you want to full stack them or maybe you have, a popular Cardinals stack or just a popular stack in general, and you want to balance it out with some relatively low owned power from the Yankees. You can do that as well. As I mentioned before, about a 180 expected ISO to both sides of the plate from Kevin Gossman so far this season. Lower K percentage against lefties than righties. Obviously, a park downgrade, at least to some extent, for left-handed bats here, though. Or for the Yankees, rather, not playing in Yankee Stadium, taking away that short porch to right. Affects Aaron Judge kind of, I guess, just given the fact that we've seen him sort of change his hitting approach this year and just look to flick balls over the wall in right. But obviously, Aaron Judge more than capable of hitting it out anywhere. On the Toronto side against Rodon, getting to 11% earning Clement right now. He's getting 8% ownership. That's the high mark on the team. He's only 3,400, second base, third base eligible, likely to be hitting in a preferable spot in the order against the left-handed Rodon. Clement does tend to hit the ball pretty hard when he makes contact. So from a value standpoint, I think he looks fine. It's not that the matchup is good. Obviously, Rodon, a good pitcher overall, but it is a good price tag. It is a good enough hitter. Rodon this season, striking out 27% of righties, sub 300 expected WOBA. You do have stolen base upside if you get on against him. He's never been particularly good at holding runners. Beyond Clement, I'm getting the 5% Springer and 2% or less of everybody else. 3% ownership coming in the Springer, 2% or less of everyone else. So overall, Blue Jays not looking like any sort of a priority here, but you do have a value option in Clement, most likely hitting near the top of the order here against Rodon. Angels are taking on the Mets in New York. Kodai Senga on the mound for the Mets, making his second start back from the injured list. For the Angels, we have Tyler Anderson going at 6K in a pretty difficult spot against the Mets. Anderson's somebody that I do get to a decent amount because he's always just like really cheap, but I'm not getting much here. He's getting 4% ownership. I have 5%. If you're playing a bunch of lineups and you need a cheap pitcher and he falls in to a lineup here or there, you don't need to like rebuild them or anything, but you're certainly not going out of your way to get to Tyler Anderson. He's not a very good strikeout pitcher. He's not in a very good strikeout spot. 18% strikeout percentage this year. Mets are a good offense overall. On the other side, Kodai Senga, I'm curious to see if this changes, but right now he's projected for like 22% ownership at 9,300. And I sort of get it. Like, it's a really good strikeout spot for him. He's a very good pitcher. The Angels against right-handed pitching this season have the second highest strikeout percentage in baseball. The only team that has struck out at a higher rate is Colorado, and they don't count because they are not a real baseball team. The Angels' strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching is 2 points higher than any of the Major League Baseball teams this year. Detroit has the third highest strikeout percentage at 2 points lower than the Angels. So it is a great spot for Senga. My concern here is just what the range of outcomes actually looks like for him, because he made one rehab start, and then in his first start back from the injured list, he only went 4 innings. He was removed after 67 pitches. Normally, I would expect you're getting something like 80, 85 pitches here. There is also reason for the Mets to be cautious with him in general. You're talking about a pitcher that missed all of last season, then has already spent time on the injured list this season. Now, the one piece that I don't know, and if somebody's seen an article on it, let me know. You did have the All-Star break, so he hasn't pitched in like 10 days. Maybe the Mets got him in there and he just threw like a simulated game where he threw 90 pitches or something. That is possible. And then the Mets could kind of just treat this as like, instead of his second start back from the injured list, it's his third start back. That is possible. And if that were the case, then yeah, Senga would look pretty good here. But the reason the ownership is kind of surprising to me is it kind of seems like the ownership is assuming that's the case. Whereas projections for us, projections for other places I've looked in the industry are more on the page of like, it's his second start back. He's probably going to face a couple batters less than he otherwise would. You can see on the screen that we have him projected right now to face between 21 and 22 batters. I actually bumped that a little bit when I ran my stuff. I gave him an extra batter. I still didn't get to him. I have him in like 1% of my lineups right now at that 21% or 22% ownership projection. So that's what's kind of weird to me. I wouldn't be surprised if you do see the ownership number kind of come down. But I don't know, maybe people are just going to click in because he's a good pitcher and he's facing the Angels. It's not like it's the worst idea in the world. It's just that there are plenty of other pitchers on this slate that I think actually project a little bit better if you assume that he's going to be somewhat limited here. If you think that he's just going to go out there and, so like prior, if you look at Senga's starts this year, he's made 14 total starts. His 2 most recent, he faced 18 and 19 batters, but you had the stint on the injured list in the middle there. So you had the injury, and then you had his first game back from injury. His first 2 starts of the season, he threw 5 innings, He missed all of last year. So you never want to just like throw out starts that don't fit your argument. But I think it's very reasonable when you're looking at Kodai Senga to say, all right, we can kind of ignore the two most recent starts and we can kind of ignore the first two starts of the year. And that leaves us with 10 starts. In those 10 starts, he's actually averaged like 25 or 25 and a half total batters faced. So if you are of the mind that he's not going to be limited today, then this projection is a lot lower than it should be. You probably would want to, bump it by like 15% or something. And then suddenly, you're getting a 17 fantasy point projection or somewhere in there. You're getting a more favorable range of outcomes. His chances of getting a win increase because his innings pitched would increase. So if we get some sort of notification that either he's not going to be limited or you just want to treat it like he's not going to be limited, which I think is at least defensible, then I think he looks really good. My concern, though, is just if I do think he's going to throw like 80, 85 pitches and he's going to be 22% owned, can't I just kind of find that upside elsewhere at maybe even a cheaper price tag? So this is one where I think the way you approach it really depends on two things. One, where the ownership projection actually ends up. And then two, how exactly do you view his chances of being limited? I've kind of given you my thoughts. I think 80 to 85 is likely, but again, it's not out of the realm of possibility that this is actually, based on what he's done as far as bullpen work goes, essentially his third start back instead of his second start back. That is certainly possible, depending on what they did with him and how aggressive they want to be with him, which is the other reason that, at least right now, I'm kind of leaning towards the more cautious side, just because we are talking about a pitcher with injury history. Also, you're talking about a Japanese pitcher where, in general, like that league doesn't play as many games as Major League Baseball does. Like you've seen it with the Orioles this year when Sagano was pitching well, they started kind of pushing his starts a day back to try and like make things more in line with the workload he was used to. So that's something else where, if I'm kind of on the fence about how I want to approach this, I'm kind of just leaning, for me personally, at least, towards he has the injury history already in the majors. He's not somebody that, while he's a veteran pitcher, he's not somebody that has spent the last 10 years making, 35 major league starts a season or anything like that. So I am kind of leaning towards that like 22 and a half batters faced. But if you disagree, then I do think Senga would look good. The matchup is certainly great. A lot just really comes down to that ownership and exactly how you think the Mets are going to handle him. For the offenses here, starting on the Angels side, they're not getting any ownership whatsoever. So I am getting to them a little bit just because you have power bats here. As we saw yesterday, it's not like they had a good matchup yesterday against Suarez. They still were, they came through. The Angels are one of these teams where the range of outcomes is always going to be favorable for them because they have so much power. They have so much speed. The median projections here against Senga certainly are not great because he is a good pitcher. But you have Mike Trout, you have Joe Adell, you have Zach Neto, you have Ohapi, you have Ward, you have Soler. Like these guys all have massive power. A few of them can steal bases. So there is big upside when you view it in the sense of what does it look like for the Angels when things go well. I talk about this a lot, but it's something that I think kind of goes overlooked when you're talking about baseball because you can have a team with the Angels here have a 4 implied run total, which is obviously low, but you can have teams that have similar run totals and one is just much more favorable for tournament DFS than the other because one is, the White Sox or the Pirates, like a team that doesn't have a lot of power on their team. And if they do score 7 runs, it's probably a lot of singles and doubles. Whereas the Angels have power throughout their lineup. Most of their lineup has an ISO north or an expected ISO north of 200 against right-handed pitching. So if they do well, it's probably really, really productive for DFS. Now, they're not super likely to do well because they're not great overall. They all strike out a ton. They are certainly flawed hitters for the most part, and they're facing a really good pitcher in Senga, who so far this season against right-handed hitters, 23.5% K percentage, only a 112 expected ISO. Lefties have a 128 expected ISO. The advantage is certainly in Senga's favor, but you're getting like 1% ownership coming into the Angels. I have 10% Joe Adell. I have 9% Mike Trout. I have 8% Neto, 4% Ohapi, sub 4% Ward, Soler, everyone else. But Joe Adell at 4,200, Trout at 5,100, Neto 5,200 at shortstop. Those guys in particular, I am right now in that 8 to 10% range. They're obviously all very high upside guys. They have massive power. You get some stolen base upside as well. so far this season against right-handed pitching. 235 expected ISO for Zach Neto, 304 for Mike Trout, 296 for Joe Adell. I think he's somebody that kind of just goes overlooked from a real life baseball standpoint. Like, this was a legitimate power hitting prospect when he came up. And then he just did the thing that right-handed power hitting prospects do a lot, where he got to the major leagues. His inability to make contact really showed up. He was striking out at massive clips. He wasn't hitting for a ton of power because he was not getting in good counts. He wasn't making contact. And then it took him a while, but he adjusted. He's striking out 24% of the time this year, which is very manageable. He has a nearly 300 expected ISO. This is not like a random player that just started hitting for power. This is a legitimate power hitter that took a little bit of time to adjust to the major leagues and seems to have finally made that adjustment and be legitimately good. So I have no problem getting to him at 4,200 either, despite the tough matchup. On the other side, for the Mets, certainly a better matchup for them against Anderson than the Angels have against Senga. Anderson, keep in mind, is a reverse splits guy. Juan Soto hits left-handed pitching well. Not that you should ever, be afraid to play Juan Soto, but you certainly shouldn't be afraid to play Juan Soto in this matchup against Anderson. 255 expected ISO allowed to left-handed hitters this year for Tyler Anderson. 188 to right-handed hitters. So he gives up power to both sides, but he's actually given up more to lefties. And he is a reverse splits pitcher where it is very obvious why that is the case. 43% usage on his changeup to right-handed hitters, 22% swinging strike percentage on that pitch. He only throws it about 10% of the time to lefties. He doesn't have anything that he throws to lefties that generates swings and misses at anywhere close to an above average rate. So completely makes sense why he's not able to get lefties out. Juan Soto, since the start of last season against left-handed pitching, 257 expected ISO, 425 expected WOBA, 5% projected ownership. I'm getting to 12%. Lindor is getting 10% ownership. I'm at 12. Vientos is at 8%. I'm at 10. Alonso's at 6%. I'm at 9. And then 5% or less of everybody else for both me and the field. So again, you do have a reverse splits pitcher here, but he does still give up some power to righties with that 188 expected ISO. Lindor has a 221 expected ISO against left-handed pitching since the start of last season. Alonso, 251. I will point out, with the two of them, or the three right-handed bats that I was getting to, Lindor, Vientos, and Alonso, only one of them has had success against left-handed changeups since last year. Very small sample. This is not something that I think you want to look at super heavily, but I do view it more as a stat where, obviously, if they've done well against the opposing pitcher's primary pitch, that doesn't make you like them any less. So I'm not saying that, I would downgrade Lindor because he only has a 149 expected ISO against left-handed changeups, or Vientos because it's sub 100. But I do like the fact that Pete Alonso is at 281 with a 14% swinging strike percentage. So Alonso has not had difficulty with the pitch at all. So still like Lindor, still like Vientos. Alonso is relatively expensive at 5,100, but not for his individual skill set. He is day to day, so we do need to make sure he's actually in the lineup. But if he's in there, I do like the spot for Pete Alonso quite a bit. Juan Soto, though, my favorite play from the Mets right now. San Francisco taking on the Braves in Atlanta. About a 5 total for the Braves, around 5 for the Giants as well, 4.5. Bryce Elder pitching for Atlanta. Hayden Birdsong going for San Francisco. Birdsong 6,600, Elder 6,300. Neither pitcher is very expensive. Elder's getting some ownership at 10K or at 10%. I'm getting to about 7% of him. I think that, again, he's not a priority. I don't think you need to pay down for pitching all that much on this slate. Hitter pricing just isn't very expensive. We have the Cardinals with the highest run total on the slate. They have one hitter priced above 5K. And they're the second most expensive hitter on the slate, at least looking at projected lineups. So there's just not really a lot of hitting you have to pay up for today. And then it's not like you have a 12K Scooble to prioritize either. So I think it's going to be pretty easy to just get to pitchers in the $8,000 to $9,500 range if you want to. And so that makes ownership and the need to get to the really cheap pitchers lower than it would be on some other slates. But if you do need a cheap pitcher here, $6,300 Elder is perfectly fine. Would obviously prefer him if this game were in San Francisco, but the Giants are not a great offense overall. 13th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this season, 22nd in WRC+. Elder comes into this start with only a 19.5% strikeout percentage, but for his price tag, that is good enough. Does have good command, doesn't have great stuff. So yeah, decent point per dollar option if you need it. Birdsong on the other side, getting 3% ownership at 6,600. Does have a 22.5% strikeout percentage this year. Stuff is playing out worse than last year. Command has been absolutely awful. The Braves, while they have certainly had their struggles this year, they are 11th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. They are 18th in WRC plus. They are still a scarier lineup to face, I think, than the Giants are, just because this team should turn it around. I mean, you have Acuna, you have Olsen, you have Murphy. Albies hasn't had a good year, but historically he's a good hitter. They should turn it around. Harris is having a bad year, but in the past has been solid. So again, if you kind of land on Birdsong in the same way as like Tyler Anderson, like if you told me you would rather, I said I had 4% or 5% Tyler Anderson. If you tell me you would rather play Hayden Birdsong, like sure, I'm not gonna. I have no argument there. They're like the same play, but I don't have any Birdsong right now. For the offenses here, starting on the Giants side against Atlanta, 10% ownership coming into Mike Yastrzemski at 3,700. That is the highest owned guy on the Giants. 7 to 8% ownership for Chapman, for Devers, for Ramos, for Adames, and then it drops off from there. I'm mostly with the field here. I'm a little bit over 13% Devers, 12% Yastrzemski. Puts me a little bit over the field, but nothing too crazy there. 9% Ramos, 7% Adames, 6% Chapman. I think it's an okay spot for them against Elder. There are plenty of good offenses on this slate. Obviously, a lot of teams in this like 4.5 to 5 total range. It is a park upgrade for the Giants in terms of home runs, getting out of San Francisco. Elder has allowed a 231 expected ISO to lefties and a 198 expected ISO to righties this year. He's not a particularly good pitcher. 351 expected WOBA to righties, 400 to lefties. And you do have some power here that, again, should benefit from not being in San Francisco. Against right-handed pitching this season, Ramos has a 193 expected ISO. Devers is at 259. Adames is at 228. Yastrzemski's at 156, which isn't crazy, but for 3,700 is not the end of the world. Chapman's at 212. So there is some power here, and they are reasonably priced. They are an affordable stack. You can get some good one-offs around them. Josh Gillum said his fantasy lab's still down for anyone else. Hasn't worked all morning. I wasn't aware that site had worked since 2017, so I can't help you out there. So yeah, I think the Giants are just one of many like decent value stacks that look fine. The matchup against Elder is fine. There's just a lot of teams that look very similar to them as well. On the Atlanta side against Birdsong, 5-6% ownership to Albies, to Olsen, to Nacho Alvarez, to Ronald Acuna, a little bit more to Jerkson Profar at 10%. He's getting the most ownership here. 3,600, probably leading off against Birdsong. I'm not getting to too much Atlanta. Wouldn't mind if I got a little bit more, but again, there's just so many teams that look very similar today. You're not going to get to all of them probably. And Atlanta right now is one that I'm not getting too much of. I have 6% Albies. I have 6% Olsen, 4 to 5% of Murphy, Acuna, Profar. So I have them a little bit, but even or a little bit below the field. So far this year, a 248 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Birdsong, 144 to righties. So you do prefer left-handed bats here. It is a big park downgrade for him. And obviously, if you can get to Matt Olson, great. Albies is 3,600. He'll be hitting from the left side. We have seen a little bit more production out of him lately. Acuna, right-handed, but it's Ronald Acuna. Profar will be hitting left-handed. So there is some left-handed power upside here. Drake Baldwin, if you need a catcher in the middle of the order, obviously has some upside as well. So I do think the Braves are fine. They just look like a lot of other teams. But I do like the left-handed power here for Atlanta. Checking the Giants bullpen real quick to see what they have as far as left-handed relievers go. They have two listed, Matt Gage and Joey Lucchesi, who I had no idea was still in the major leagues. Lucchesi threw 23 pitches yesterday. Gage didn't pitch since Saturday. So they probably have two lefty relievers available. Olsen hits lefties well anyway, so not the end of the world there. I do like left-handed bats, plus obviously Acuna in this matchup against Birdsong in that park. White Sox taking on Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay. Josh said he just uses the lineups page. Yeah, I used that for a long time too. I actually don't remember why I stopped. If you need one, Daily Roto, I think is... Sorry, RotoWire has a solid, easy-to-use one. Tampa Bay taking on the White Sox. Shane Baz going for the Rays. For the White Sox, we have Sean Burke. $6,200 price tag for Burke. $9K for Baz. I am not getting to Burke. Nobody's getting to Burke. I don't see any real reason to get to Burke. Tampa Bay has the highest non-Coors Field total on the slate as of right now. Shane Baz, though, 25% ownership at 9K. I'm getting to 25%. He looks good, and I actually did bump our projection on him a little bit. Nothing too crazy, but we have seen him working a lot deeper into games lately. Now, part of that obviously is just a function of he's been pitching well. So you don't want to just say, oh, yeah, Shane Baz is never going to have another bad start. He's going to face 25 or more hitters every time he goes out there for the rest of the year. That's obviously not the case. But this is somebody that, he's a highly regarded pitching prospect, had some injuries, was kind of, went through a stretch where he was good, but not great. And he's kind of seemingly putting it together. He's been really good lately. Over his last 10 starts, he's averaging like 25 and a half total batters faced. We have him projected for 23.8. So it's not like we're super low or anything. But I did bump it a little bit just because he does have the above average matchup with the White Sox, in addition to getting a longer leash lately, working deeper into games. So either way, even if you don't change it at all, he's going to look good. But I did bump it slightly. Got to 25% of him. I like it here. I think he's a good pitcher. The matchup against the White Sox is obviously very good. Overall this season, 23.4% strikeout percentage, close to league average command, well above average stuff. His stuff plus grade this year is up 4.5 points from last year. His strikeout percentage is up nearly 2 points. I like Shane Baz here quite a bit. For the bats on the White Sox side, I'm still getting to the White Sox. I always get to the White Sox. They've turned into Kansas City from a couple years ago for me. They are a team that is not good, obviously. That goes without saying. But they have just enough talent that on slates where they are really cheap, which is all of them, and they're not popular, which is most of them, they just show up because they aren't – their prices are – from an individual standpoint, their prices are a little bit lower than they probably should be because the team collectively is so bad at scoring that they lose at bats, they lose plate appearances, and it pulls down how many at bats you can project them for. But like Andrew Benintendi, if you just look at Andrew Benintendi's stats and you ignore that he's on the White Sox, and you ignore that his teammates can't hit, and he's a little bit less likely to score runs because they can't drive him in, and he's going to get, fewer plate appearances because they turn the lineup over less. If you just look at his production, 339 expected WOBA, 225 expected ISO this year, only a 14% strikeout percentage, puts the ball in play, does damage in terms of quality of contact. His actual ISO is about 60 points lower, but that's somebody that probably should be like 3,700, 3,600. Same kind of thing for Miguel Vargas. He's 3K flat. He gives you some stolen base upside. He has a 180 expected ISO. Luis Robert has been absolute dog shit this year, but he still steals bases and historically is a good hitter. Chase Mydroth can run a little bit. He's 3,600. Talkman at 3,400 has, a little bit of stolen base upside and some semblance of power. So it's not a team that I ever like getting to, but it is one that you can use to save money and be contrarian if you need to. So you're getting about 5% projected ownership to Benintendi and Vargas, like 3 to 4% on Mydroth, Talkman, 2% to Robert. I'm getting the 13% Benintendi, 12% Vargas, 10% Robert right now, 7% Mydroth, 5% Talkman. So I'm over the field on the White Sox. You do get negative correlation against Baz. I certainly don't like the matchup, but they're cheap and they do at least have speed and power in some form. Baz has given up a lot more power to righties this year. Lower strikeout percentage as well. Saw somebody mention it. 19% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters this year. 210 expected ISO compared to a 28.5% strikeout percentage and sub 100 expected ISO to lefties. So if you were just singling out the best matchups here, I think you're looking at Miguel Vargas and Luis Robert. From talking about it from Baz's standpoint, I'm still not too concerned about it because the White Sox collectively are just such a group of not good hitters. But their projected lineup it does skew maybe a little righty heavy, but pretty balanced. So I don't think it's like a huge, unless they run out an unexpected lineup, I don't think it's a huge thing to consider there. But do keep an eye on it. Like if the White Sox just run a bunch of lefties out there, that's better for Baz than a bunch of righties. But talking about it from like a hitting standpoint, I do think that the matchup sets up the best for Vargas and Robert. Tampa Bay on the other side against Burke. Yeah, and Steiny mentioned the minor league park as well. 12% ownership coming into Brandon Lau, who I thought was on the injured list, but maybe he's just day to day. Trying to double check that right now. Okay, no, he was just he left yesterday's game early, is what I saw. Plantar fasciitis he just came off the injured list the other day. So decent chance that Brandon Lau's not in the lineup today, but he is in the projected lineup that I used. If he's in, he's projected for 12% ownership. He is in 12% of my lineups. Junior Caminero projected for 7% ownership. I got to 10%. Sean Burke so far this season, 23% strikeout percentage, 188 expected ISO to lefties. So he's been not good, but okay, competent against left-handed hitters this year. He has not been competent against righties. 14.5% strikeout percentage is like 8.5 points lower against righties than lefties. 285 expected ISO is nearly 100 points higher against righties than lefties. Expected WOBA to righties is like 50 points higher at 391. Junior Caminero here, he's expensive at 5,300, but I really like the power upside that we see for him. 231 expected ISO against right-handed pitching this year. Yandy Diaz has a 196 expected ISO. He's 4% owned. I have about 7%. I'm not getting into too much of the rest of Tampa. Everybody else is projected for 5% ownership or less. So I think Tampa Bay overall is in a pretty good spot. But the guys standing out the most are Brandon Lau, if he's active, which my guess is he won't be, but the nice thing is we should find out hours before lock. He's only 4,400, but I really like the individual matchup for Junior Caminero and for Yandy Diaz. Caminero, a little bit more power than Diaz so far this year, but I like the righty-righty spot here. So, yeah, Tampa Bay looks pretty good, and they're not getting a ton of ownership because you have St. Louis, who is cheaper and has a run total, a full run higher. A's taking on Texas in Texas, about a 4.5 total for both teams, give or take. For the Rangers, we have Jack Leiter at 6,800. For the A's, we have Jacob Lopez at 6,800. So two pretty cheap pitchers here in Texas. They both look playable. They both look fine. I think these are two of the better value options at pitcher. The wrong column. About a 13 fantasy point projection right now to Jack Leiter. About a 14 fantasy point projection to Jacob Lopez. 15% projected ownership, give or take, for both Lopez and Leiter. I have 11% Lopez. I have 9% Leiter. So slightly below the field, but same ballpark. Seeing it pretty much the same way as the field. Both of these pitchers are fine. Both of these matchups are fine. Neither matchup is quote unquote safe. Like both hitters have hitters that are, but both lineups have hitters that are capable of doing damage. But you are getting this game in Texas instead of the fake ballpark in Sacramento, which shouldn't hurt. Jacob Lopez so far this year, 47 innings pitched as a starter, 26.8% strikeout percentage. His command has been above average. His stuff is graded out as below average. But keep in mind, Stuff Plus does have some biases. So you have a pitcher with good command that's been able to get strikeouts so far. Leiter on the other side, striking out about 20% of hitters. Very, very good stuff. 110 Stuff Plus grade. Command has not been good, well below average at just 91. He did deal with some pitch tipping stuff earlier in the season as well. So I do think there's a chance that you see as the year goes on, his strikeout percentage increase at least a little bit. It's still been hit or miss since he switched his glove. He got rid of the finger hole. So hitters can't, he's not accidentally doing different things there depending on his pitch grip and everything. It's not like he's just like flipped to dominating or anything like that. But the combination of potentially tipping pitches earlier in the year and just having really good stuff and being a very highly regarded prospect, I do think maybe you see that strikeout percentage trend up a bit. It is potentially a good strikeout matchup here against the A's. It does matter to some extent who exactly is in the lineup. Jacob Wilson, individually, very low strikeout rate. Miguel Andujar, individually, very low strikeout rate. But most of the rest of this team strikes out at an above average clip. So both of these guys look like pretty solid value options. There is certainly upside here. Rangers against left-handed pitching since the start of last season, ranked second in strikeout percentage at 26%. Again, keep in mind that will be somewhat biased, but they have an 86 WRC plus. They've been flat out bad against left-handed pitching since last year. The A's so far this season against right-handed pitching, they are 14th in WRC plus, but they are also 10th in strikeout percentage. And again, that's going to be weighted down a little bit by guys like Jacob Wilson, when from a fantasy standpoint, it's a little bit misleading because you're still only facing Wilson once out of every 9 batters. If Andujar's in there, you're getting 2 out of 9 batters that don't strike out a lot. But then you get a lot of guys, Butler, dangerous hitter, but strikes out. Rooker, dangerous hitter, but will strike out, low to mid 20s. Nick Kurtz looks like a phenomenal hitter, but he's still striking out 30% of the time. So you get a lot of that. If Max Muncy's in the lineup, he's a very high strikeout guy as well, around 30% so far this season. So you do have high K guys here. It is a pretty high upside spot for Leiter. It is also a dangerous spot. Checking the splits for these guys, Leiter striking out 20% of righties, 20% of lefties, almost identical power numbers as well. 203 expected ISO to righties, 202 to lefties. So there's nothing like lineup based that is going to really move the needle too much on Leiter outside of the actual strikeout percentages of the hitters in there. Like if you get somebody other than Andujar, the strikeout projection for Leiter goes up, but there's nothing splits based that should really change that. Lopez this year, higher strikeout percentage against lefties as you would expect, but still has a 27% K rate against righties, 158 expected ISO against righties, 33% strikeout percentage against lefties. So yeah, if you get more lefties for Texas, great, but you don't need to be afraid of a right-handed heavy lineup that you're probably going to get from the Rangers. For the bats here, not much ownership coming in, which I guess isn't too surprising since you have a combined 30% ownership going to the 2 pitchers and you have plenty of offensive spots to get to. But I am getting to the A's pretty good amount here. I really like the power upside against Leiter. I like the fact that they have power. This is another spot where I think, especially when you look at the pricing on both sides, you have the $6,800 Leiter, and then you have this A's team where the most expensive hitter in the projected lineup is $4,500 Nick Kurtz. A lot of power, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of ways that one side or the other can be really useful in tournaments here. So Kurtz 4% projected ownership. I'm getting the 14%, 5% projected ownership coming into Rooker at 4,400. I have 13%. Langolier is only getting 3% at 3,800. I have 11%. I have 11% Butler as well at 5%. And then I am 5% or less of everybody else, but they're also all barely owned. So I am over the field here on the A's. I like the power upside. If we look through their hitters, individually so far this season, as I mentioned, Leiter just north of a 200 expected ISO to both sides of the plate. Lawrence Butler, 164 expected ISO is solid, but also gives you stolen base upside. Nick Kurtz, 353 expected ISO. Brent Rooker, 255. Langoliers, 187. Soderstrom, 232. There's power at the top and in the middle of this order against a pitcher that is susceptible to it. On the other side for Texas, I am above the field on them as well. I'm not as excited about the matchup against Lopez as I am against Leiter. And I don't mean that as a knock on Leiter. Like, again, I think he has really good stuff. I think he's probably going to be a good major league pitcher. But so far, we have seen him struggle more than Lopez in terms of 1, missing bats, and 2, limiting the quality of contact against him. But you still have this pretty cheap Texas team against a relatively popular pitcher in Lopez who has been solid so far, but is overall unproven at the major league level. $4,300 Wyatt Langford getting 9% ownership. I'm at 15. 4% ownership coming into $4,800 Seager. It is lefty-lefty, but it is Corey Seager. I'm getting to 11%. I have 10% apiece of Semien and Garcia at 7 and 5% ownership respectively. And then I don't really have too much of Texas beyond those guys, but the 1 through 4, likely 1 through 4 hitters, I am getting a bit over the field here against Lopez. There was a question in chat from Dante. Said, do you base your entries in the main MLB GPP on payout structure, entry fee, etc.? I've been having success with 20 to 50 lineups, but never just settle on a particular number. No. So if you're asking like how many I play, no, I generally play like 50. If it's the $5, I'll play 150. I generally base it more on like how many entries I'm putting in something on like buy-in than payout structure. But yeah, I'm pretty much consistently playing the same number of lineups in like the large field flagship, I think is what you're asking. If you're asking like which lineups I play based on payout structure and stuff, then yeah, like that's factored into lineups that you expect to have the best ROI in given tournaments and stuff like that. So that is factored into what I'm playing. Kansas City taking on the Cubs in Chicago. Pretty low total in this one, which I hadn't looked at the weather, but I'm going to go ahead and guess that the wind is either neutral or blowing in. Yeah, wind blowing in from center at about 10 miles an hour. Good pitching weather here in Chicago, and that's why we see this low total. Noah Cameron, $8,000 facing off against a Ryan Brazier opener, and it looks like Chris Flexen, long guy. So Noah Cameron getting 5% ownership, Chris Flexen getting 2%. I don't see the need to get to a $5,500 Chris Flexen against one of the hardest teams in baseball to strike out. I don't really see a need to get to too much Noah Cameron in this spot either. He's getting 5% ownership. I have 1%. The matchup here, say what you want about the weather. The matchup here still sucks against the Cubs. They're a really good offense. They are not an easy team to strike out. Active roster ranks 24th in strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching since the start of last year. 5th in WRC plus. And I've said it before as well. I don't think Cameron is a bad pitcher. I don't think he's a guy that, is going to have a 2-point-something ERA in the major leagues either. 3.94 xFIP, 21% strikeout percentage, 70 innings pitched. I think he's solid, but I don't think I think he's a little bit overpriced in general because of how low his ERA has been through his first, 5 to 10 starts, whatever he's at. But the matchup here against the Cubs, I just think there's plenty of other options that I would rather get to despite the weather. For the bats here, starting on the Kansas City side, 4% ownership coming into Salvador Perez is the high mark for the field. 9% Bobby Witt. 9% Bobby Witt is the high mark for me, followed by 5% Perez, 6% Garcia. Not too much Kansas City for me. Again, the hitting conditions are not good. You do have the opener, followed by Flexen, which isn't my favorite thing to target either. Not that Flexen is a great pitcher, but I think there's just plenty of better offensive spots in general to get to here, but certainly never going to shy away from some low-owned Bobby Witt or Salvador Perez just because of the upside that they give you. For the Cubs against Cameron, I'm not getting to them. The field's not getting to them. They steal a lot of bases. They hit a lot of home runs, but they are also expensive, at least the guys that you would really want. Kyle Tucker, 6,100. Seiya Suzuki, 5,100. Pete Crow Armstrong, 5,600. Like, it's tough to stack this team, especially when you include that you have a team with a 6.5 total in Colorado that outside of one hitter is all less than 5K. You have all these other teams already mentioned, that have like 5 to 5.5 run totals that are cheap. But yeah, to Steinman's point, if you get to like a Cub as a one-off or a two-man or something, Swanson, Suzuki, Tucker, Suzuki, obviously massive ceiling there at no ownership, but I just don't really have I don't have more than 1% right now of anybody on the Cubs, and it's 1% Hap, 1% Suzuki, 1% Tucker. So, again, if you just want to pay up for them, like I said, I had 12% Aaron Judge. If you're just like, Judge is going to be 6% owned, I'm going to go Tucker for 1%. Like, cool. Ceiling is massive for him too. But I don't have the Cubs. St. Louis taking on the Rockies in Colorado. This one should be fun. Austin Gomber going for the Rockies. Mike McCreevy. Yeah, Michael McCreevy going for St. Louis. 2% ownership coming into McCreevy at 6,500. 0% ownership coming into Gomber at 4,500. I have 0 of either one. If you needed me to make a case for a pitcher here, for McCreevy, it would be he's facing the Rockies. For Gomber, it would be he's probably like the 10th most expensive shortstop today. Outside of that, I don't have one, and I'm not getting to them. For the bats, this is where obviously things will get interesting. Right now, 26% projected ownership coming into Wilson Contreras, 21% to Wynn, 21% to Walker, 19 to Donovan, 16 to Herrera, 10 to 15 to Arenado, Fermin, Scott, about 10 to Pajes. So this is going to be a popular team. Was having this debate that I didn't realize was going to start an argument or be a debate on Twitter today. I laughed at DraftKings pricing and phrased it as they forgot to adjust for cores, to which some people pointed out that, well, actually, they're more expensive than normal, so they did adjust for cores, which technically is true, but they are not correctly priced for Austin Gomber and the Rockies bullpen in cores. And that is very evident in the fact that you pretty much have like 2x salary projections across, the team. Our projections on the Cardinals are lower than most other places I've looked. And you're still looking at, 2 points per dollar, give or take, across the entire lineup. So you're likely to get, 15 to 25% ownership. The more off on ownership projections that the industry is, the more popular they will be. This is the type of spot where a lot of times lately we've been seeing some of the most popular sites say, oh yeah, well, these guys are going to be 9% owned when they're absolutely not. And so they end up being, 30% instead of 20%. But one way or the other, I think you're going to end up getting like 20-ish, 25% ownership on the Cardinals here. They are obviously the most likely team to succeed. They have the highest run total by like a full run. They're facing a pitcher in Gomber who's not very good, in Coors Field, bad Rockies bullpen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The field is still more likely to beat out the Cardinals. So that's where things, sort of get interesting. And how exactly are you putting your lineups together? How are you constructing your lineups? I've said it a million times, but you can absolutely find lineups that you expect to make money with Cardinal stacks. You can absolutely find lineups that you expect to make money that have Cardinals mini stacks or one-offs. You can find lineups that you expect to make money that have no Cardinals. There's no absolute correct way to approach this. There are different ways to construct your lineups to handle it. The more Cardinals you have, the more you should be considering a low-owned pitcher or two, or the Angels at no ownership as a mini stack or something like that. But yeah, like you can still approach this however you want to approach it with St. Louis. They're going to be really popular. You can still make lineups that are good with them. Dante said, I wonder how much their pricing would be if there was an $18 main tonight. I assume you mean their ownership. I mean, the pricing would be the same, but their ownership would be higher in the $18 than the $5, most likely, just because the field size is smaller. That is one, and I mean, it kind of like offsets itself, but you will probably get a little bit less of that like steam effect tonight in the large field DraftKings because it is $5 and like 47,000 entries instead of $18 and 13,000 entries. But at the same time, 20% of 47,000 compared to 25% of 18,000, you're kind of coming out the wash. So yeah, the Cardinals look good. As far as my exposures right now, though, I'm pretty much half the field on most of these guys. I have 14% Mason Wynn at 4,600. That's my highest owned cards bat right now. 13% Herrera, 12% Contreras, 11% Donovan, sub 5% everybody else. So for me right now, I'm kind of, it looks like mixing in 1 through 4, Donovan, Contreras, Herrera, Wynn, and then not getting a lot of anything else from the cards. Collectively, certainly under the field right now. And I'm fine with that. Like, it's just easier to finish at the top of a 47,000 entry tournament by hoping that the batters that a fifth of the field is playing do poorly than it is by trying to, hope that they win the slate. And then also you can kind of like walk that line, thread that needle between all these other, combinations of teams that have the Cardinals. So again, I think you can make good Cardinals lineups. For me personally, right now, I am not getting to them nearly as much as the field. And that was my expectation. I assume that I won't. Again, and it's not by design. Like if I run through my process and it says, oh, you should jam the Cardinals, like I would do that. So I'm not going into this ahead of time saying like, oh, the cards are, I don't want to play the cards, but running through my process right now, it confirms what I thought in my head that for me personally, my approach, probably not going to have as much of the Cardinals as the field is projected to. On the other side, for Colorado, less ownership there. They are in line for second highest total on the slate. They're neck and neck with a bunch of other teams behind the Cardinals. Obviously not a particularly good offense. I forgot to mention it with Gomber. This came up on Twitter earlier too, though. Whatever lefties are in the lineup for St. Louis are perfectly fine. Like, yes, Donovan doesn't hit as well against lefties. Austin Gomber has always been reverse splits. If you go back to 2023, 255 expected ISO against left-handed hitters, 201 to righties. So again, it's not that righties are bad against him. It's very similar to what I was saying about Tyler Anderson, where it's like a worse version of Tyler Anderson, which says a lot. But yeah, you shouldn't be afraid to play any left-handed bats against Austin Gomber because one, if they light him up early, he's getting out of the game anyway, and two, he can't get lefties out. Moving on to the Rockies here against McGreevy, about 10 to 11% ownership coming into Goodman, to Beck, to Tovar. I'm in the same ballpark, 13% Goodman, 11% Beck, 10% Tovar. I have 9% Doyle at 7% owned, 8% McMahon, 7% Freeman. I'm pretty much in line with the field throughout this Rockies lineup. They are cheap. You have Hunter Goodman at $5K. Everybody else is $4,700 or less if Freeman is in the lineup, $4,400 or less if Freeman is not in the lineup. He is day-to-day. McGreevy, limited sample for him, but so far in his major league career, 102 expected ISO to righties, 200 to lefties. 18.5% strikeout percentage to righties, 21% to lefties. We don't really have much to go on here with McGreevy. We do know that he's probably not a great pitcher. He's pitching in cores. Mostly, if I'm getting to the Rockies, I just want to get to the best hitters on the Rockies because this is not a team that gives you a lot to work with beyond the best hitters: Goodman, Beck, Tovar, Doyle, McMahon, Freeman. Tolia has power at 3,800, just a lot of swing and miss in there as well. So even with the field right now on Colorado, below the field on St. Louis, if you're playing cash games, I can't imagine not prioritizing St. Louis bats here. They're the most likely team to succeed, but they are still a dog to the field because there's 19 other teams. Houston taking on the Diamondbacks in Arizona, and we have another not fun pitcher that I'm getting to in this one. Zach Gallen is facing off against Colton Gordon. Gordon coming in at $6,900. Gallen coming in at $7,500. Gallen has not been great this year, but obviously does have a track record of being a good pitcher, and you are getting a pricing discount for the year he's had so far. He has struck out 22.2% of hitters. That's down about 3 points from last year. 90.5 stuff plus grade is down 1 point from last year, but I will reiterate that it's really useful to compare stuff plus grades when you can to what a pitcher has graded out as in the past, as opposed to just the league average. Because Zach Gallen, while he has been a very effective pitcher in the past, has always not graded out well in stuff plus. That metric is inherently biased in some ways, including generally not favoring changeups. So Gallen is somebody that gets pulled down there. So I'm not really concerned about the fact that he has a 90 stuff plus grade. It is a little bit worse than we saw last year. His command has still been good, though, 104 location plus grade. So I still think he's a solid pitcher, even if he's not as good as he has been in the past. We are far enough into the season that 22% strikeout percentage does speak for itself. But he's only 7,500. He's getting 18% ownership. I have 45%. I don't feel good about it. Again, he hasn't been a great pitcher overall this year. The matchup against the Astros is average-ish. They're 20th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. They're 16th in WRC+. I don't feel great about it, but I do like the price tag. I do think that from a talent standpoint, Gallen's probably a little bit underpriced here. So it's kind of similar to Gausman, where obviously the Astros are not the same sort of terrifying matchup that the Yankees are, but it's similar to Gausman in that I'm about 2x the field. I understand it. I think he's a solid value. I think there's upside here. I would not be upset at all if I ended up with 30% instead of 45%, but I am getting to Gallen here against Houston. Against righties so far this season, Gallen striking out 24.6%. Lefties only striking out 20% of the time. He has allowed power to both sides of the plate, 238 expected ISO to righties, 205 to lefties. But I do like that strikeout percentage is 4.5 points higher against righties. Houston doesn't have lefties, so there's not a whole lot they can do to combat that. It does increase his projection a little bit. You're probably only going to have Caratini and Trammell as left-handed bats in this lineup for the Astros. So that is good for Gallen. I'm not getting to Colton Gordon here. Tough strikeout matchup. Really, really good offense overall. 6,900, he's cheap. He's shown really good command so far in the major leagues. He's only struck out 19% of hitters. Does have a 111 location plus grade, just shy of a league average stuff plus grade as well. So that stuff looks fine overall, but not a pitcher that I'm looking to get to here against the Diamondbacks. For the bats, I am getting to some Houston against Gallen. So this is a spot where, to some extent, I have both sides of it. Again, I just think that when you look at the pricing here and you consider that, you consider Gallen's historical track record, that's very repetitive, but you consider Gallen's track record and his ability in the past, at least, to get strikeouts and his above average strikeout percentage against righties so far this season. At 7,500, there's clearly a ceiling there. And then you look at these Astros prices. The most expensive guy in the Astros projected lineup is Jose Altuve at $4,200. Everybody else is $3,500 or less. So very good value stack here if you want to get to two, 9K pitchers and some of the more popular or more expensive bats on the slate. Christian Walker, my highest owned guy from the Astros right now, he's only projected for 5% ownership. I have 16%. Like I said, 238 expected ISO to right-handed hitters for Gallen this year. Only a 163 actual ISO for Walker, but a 197 expected ISO. So the expected power numbers have been there for him. If you go back to last year, it's a 220 expected ISO against right-handed pitching. I love the power upside that you get for $3,100 from Walker. I'm getting the 14% Altuve at 10% owned, 4,200 with MPE. I have 9% apiece of Dubon and Diaz at 3 and 6% ownership, respectively. 8% Bryce Matthews, Taylor Trammell, Cam Smith, 5% Caratini. So I am a bit over the field on the Astros in general, but specifically highlighting Christian Walker and Jose Altuve here. On the Diamondbacks side, another team with around a 5 total going against Gordon. 8% Ketel Marte is my highest owned guy. He is the field's highest owned guy as well at 9 to 10%. Randall Grichuk getting that same 9 to 10% ownership as well. Very, very different plays. $5,700 price tag on Ketel Marte. Always has the platoon advantage no matter who he's facing. 18% strikeout percentage, 191 expected ISO to righties so far this year for Colton Gordon. 260 expected ISO against left-handed pitching this season for Marte. 302 in 296 plate appearances since the start of last year. Absolutely deserves that price. One of, if not the highest upside second baseman on the slate. Grichuk on the other side does come with significant pinch hit risk. If you look in our projections and scroll over to the right-hand side, 32% pinch hit percentage for Randall Grichuk, but he is still a good point per dollar play at 3K, has plenty of home run power, has the platoon advantage as usual because he doesn't really play against righties. So if you need a cheap, high upside outfielder, you can go there. But at the same time, you do have that pinch hit, probability that's pretty high. You have relatively high ownership. You have a lot of cheap outfielders on this slate. So I do think that there are some alternatives that are lower owned than Grichuk that are pretty interesting as well, but certainly a viable value option. Suarez has been fantastic this year. He's 5,200. He's getting 6% ownership. I have 5%. I don't have much of anyone else on Arizona, but there is certainly a lot of upside here if you can find the salary for it. Milwaukee against Seattle. In Seattle, Brandon Woodruff taking on George Kirby. 24% ownership coming into Woodruff at 9,600. 21% coming into Kirby at 9,200. I have 25% of each of them. Woodruff has been very, very, very good at getting strikeouts through his first 2 starts this year. I do not buy into it, at least entirely. This is somebody that for his career has, a 29% strikeout percentage, but he has dealt with injuries. His stuff plus grade this year is down through his first 2 starts. Again, 2 starts, don't want to read into it too much. It is down to 98, but also he made 10 minor league starts this year and was not striking guys out at a really high rate. His command through his first 2 starts has been unbelievably good, like 118 location plus grade through those first 2 starts, which obviously that's really good, but I almost view it as a red flag where, okay, his stuff is graded out as below average to average, certainly worse than it used to be. What does it look like when he, most likely stops having the best command in baseball? What do hitters do against him? So I am concerned to some extent about Woodruff. I certainly don't love the $9,600 price tag, but at the same time, you're getting him in Seattle, one of the best places to pitch in baseball. It's not a slate where you have an abundance of aces that don't have any sort of red flags. The matchup against the Mariners is certainly dangerous from a power upside standpoint, but they are also they rank 12th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching, but they're at 22.1%. For context, the Reds rank 6th at 22.9%. There's just a lot of teams in that same range. So it is a solid strikeout spot in a great park for getting strikeouts and preventing runs. I'm getting around the field on Woodruff. I just wanted to highlight that there are some red flags here. I do expect, some kind of course correction for Brandon Woodruff going forward. George Kirby on the other side, 21% projected ownership at 9,200. Okay matchup against Milwaukee. Not the best strikeout matchup. They rank 23rd in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this season. They also rank 15th in WRC+. So middle-of-the-road matchup there for Kirby. But again, you're getting them in Seattle. Great place to pitch. Kirby comes into the game with a 25% strikeout percentage, which is one of the higher marks on the slate. His command continues to be excellent. It was already really, really good last year, and it's been even better this year. 110 location plus grade last year, up to 113.5 this year. His stuff hasn't graded out as well, down from 104 to 97, but he did miss part of the year with an injury. Maybe it's just going to take a little bit of time to get that back. His fastball velo still averaging 96 miles an hour like he did last year. Strikeout percentage is actually up from last year. So overall, I think Kirby looks solid. I am right around the field on him. Looks like a game where I'll be pretty heavily invested in the pitchers on both sides. Probably not going to be too invested in the hitters here. 7% Bryce Turang is my highest owned bat from Milwaukee. That is above the field. Field's getting to 3%, and he's projected to be the highest owned hitter from Milwaukee. I have 5% Yelich. Other than that, I have 3% or less of everybody. So nothing that really stands out from the Brewers, but I am taking some shots at a $3,900 Bryce Turang. Solid stolen base threat there as well. Seattle on the other side against Woodruff. They are getting basically zero ownership. I have 2% Cal Raleigh. That's my highest owned guy there. The best case I can make for the Mariners would just be like the natural extension of what I was just saying about Brandon Woodruff. What if he just doesn't have his command at all and he still has his below average stuff? Does he just get absolutely lit up? We haven't seen what happens in that case, like for this version of Brandon Woodruff. But there's just so many relatively low-owned teams in pretty good spots. At the very least, like good home run spots. Even you talk about the Angels, they're at least like playing in Citi Field instead of Seattle. I would say it's a pretty similar spot in terms of power versus good pitcher. But at least they're not playing in like the hardest place to hit home runs. So I have a really hard time wanting to get to Seattle. Foss said, wanted to make sure you're aware that RTS projections for FanDuel are missing half their games. That is good to know. Thank you for the heads up. I'll make sure that that gets straightened out. I know in the past, sometimes it'll have an issue running our first update. I know I did a show the other day. We were missing one game and it updated before I had a chance to do anything about it. But looks like it only has 4 games up right now. I'll make sure that gets fixed. Appreciate you pointing that out. Minnesota taking on the Dodgers in Dodger Stadium. Dustin May. I think Ohtani's opening, right? Yeah, Ohtani opening for the Dodgers. Dustin May following him. 7,300, 6% ownership coming into May. I have like 1% May. I expect, that he'll give you enough innings that he's viable, but not enough that he's actually a priority here. It is a tough park to pitch in as well. You have a 4 to 4.5 total for the Dodgers. So I'm not really getting to much May. The field's not getting to too much either. Certainly not going to be interested in getting to Festa here. Tough matchup against the Dodgers. I know last time I said this, Quinn Priester went out and struck out like 42 Dodgers. But I don't really see a reason to get to a 7K Festa on this slate. You have plenty of pitching in general. Again, you don't have like a ton of elite aces, but you do have enough pitching in general that you can get to that I don't think you need to get Festa here. Jake DeWitt said Ohtani expected to go 3 innings. You're getting Ohtani just like gradually stretched out more. So like you could still get, 3 from Ohtani, 5 from May or something. But obviously the deeper into the game Ohtani goes, the less they're going to ask Dustin May to do. For the bats here, not super appealing for the Twins. You don't want to face Ohtani your first time through. Dustin May is not a great matchup. Like, I don't have a ton of interest in the Twins. The only good thing here is the park, but I have 3% Buxton, 1% Castro, less than 1% of everybody else. For the Dodgers on the other side, 22% projected ownership to a $6,400 Ohtani. Goes without saying, that is perfectly fine. I only have 9%, but, again, if you want to play Shohei Ohtani, play Shohei Ohtani. Like, he's great. It's not like it's a bad play or anything like that. 12% ownership coming into $4,400 bets. I'm about half the field there. 10% coming into Teoscar. I have 7%. I'm more in line with the field on 6% owned Will Smith, 6% owned Pages, 5% owned Conforto. So I'm either in line with the field or a bit below the field on the Dodgers here, which isn't super surprising. They're relatively expensive. Like $6,400 for Ohtani just pulls up the average salary for the stack, obviously. $4,400 for bets. It's not super expensive, but relative to the slate, it kind of is expensive. Like just in the sense that you have so many teams that are the entire lineup is less than that. You look at the Cardinals again, just to compare them, and Mason Wynn is $200 more. So I'm not getting to quite as much of the Dodgers at this ownership. I just kind of spread it out to some other teams. But clearly, if you want to play the Dodgers, great. They have a 5-run total. They're in a park that's the best for hitting home runs this year. Festa, since last season, 25% strikeout percentage to righties, also a 206 expected ISO, 166 expected ISO to lefties. So through a pretty small sample, 900 pitches thrown to lefties, 1,000 to righties. He has been a bit reverse splits, but he's given up some power to both sides. Dodgers are obviously fine. They're just not my preferred stack right now. So to recap everything that I'm getting to right now. The highest, starting with the pitchers, highest projected pitchers are up on the screen. One thing I did want to mention, I think this will come down. I think our projection on Woodruff is too high. I lowered it quite a bit. For one, we have him projected to face 23 and a half batters. He only faced 18 and 20 in his first 2 starts back. So that's reason to lower it. And our strikeout percentage is also really high. I lowered that a little bit too, just because I think that going forward, he has a lower strikeout percentage than he's had year to date, at least with what we've seen through his first couple of starts. So when I ran my stuff, I have Woodruff at like 17 and a half DraftKings points. So quite a bit lower than our baseline run in projections. I will put this in the notes for anybody subscribed if that doesn't automatically change in later runs. But I did run everything where Woodruff is basically the same as like Kirby and Boz, as opposed to much better than them. So I do want to point that out. Still close to or the highest projected pitcher, but not by this margin. So you can see the highest projected pitchers on the slate. In terms of my player exposures, Zach Gallen, Gossman, Woodruff, Kirby, Boz, my top 5 pitchers right now. For the catchers, again, you can see the highest projected on the slate. My highest owned, Hunter Goodman, Herrera, Langoliers. Highest owned first baseman, Walker, Kurtz, Vargas, Contreras, but still less than the field on Contreras. Second base, Lau. Got to make sure he's in the lineup. Probably won't be, but Lau, Donovan, Semien. Again, lower than the field on Donovan, though. Excuse me. Third base, Devers, Caminero, Vientos. Shortstop, Wynn, but again, lower than the field. Lindor, Seager, and Tovar. Outfield, I am getting to Langford, Benintendi, Rooker, Soto, Judge, Yastrzemski, Butler as my highest owned guys. So basically, I'm getting in a lot of these spots, like I mentioned, the Cardinals being my highest owned at the position, but I'm really flat in my hitter exposures overall. Like right now, my highest owned hitter is Christian Walker at 16%. So I'm really, really flat on bats. And then I'm more condensed on my pitcher exposures. For home run pick, I'm going to go with Junior Caminero. I mentioned it before, but I really like that spot for him. He's down the list a little bit here in... I'm only looking at outfielders. He's down the list a little bit here in our home run projections, but not too far down. And I just really like that matchup and ballpark for him against Sean Burke. So that's all I have for you on this one. Thank you for checking out the show. I will not be doing a show tomorrow. Have some stuff I have to deal with, but I will be back Wednesday afternoon. So thank you for checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. And I'll see you back here on Wednesday.